Welcome, everyone, to the very first episode of the Meg and Amy podcast. For those of you who don't know us, together Meg and I have more than 6 decades of experience delivering technology to the largest businesses in the world. We have recently moved from operator roles to independent advisors, and this podcast is our opportunity to give something back. Thank you for coming on this journey with us. Meg, hello, we're here.
We did it! Yay!
We did it. Well, how in the world did we get here anyway?
It is a huge question, and I hope we'll spend a little bit of time on that.
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing and the top question that people have is, how did you pick your name?
Well, it was very scientific, as you know, a little bit of crowdsourcing, and then a little bit of panic, and then a little bit of like, oh, maybe we should not overcomplicate this.
Yeah, we had a bunch of votes for Meg might be wrong, right?
Which was a solid contender, but I think that might be like a recap show title as opposed to
it might just
podcast.
be like an undertone, I think, right?
For sure, I think that's going to be a theme, a through line theme throughout.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the other the other suggestions that?
Well, I think it's worth mentioning that we got offered Brazen Hussies, a legacy name from our good friend Naomi Bloom. That was unexpected.
I think I saw a tear in your eye when Naomi offered that up.
Yeah, I did not see that one coming. That was amazing. What were some of the ones that you thought were the best?
Well, I love Jason Seiden's Curmudgeonistas. I thought that was quite clever.
I felt like that, like the instant visual for that was Statler and Waldorf from the Muppets, the two old guys laughing and making commentary from the bleachers. So I'm not sure if that's what he meant.
Maybe we'll be a little more positive than that. But there were a bunch that were like, I think Meg Wilson, our love child, said something like disrupt this with Meg and Amy, and there were some other with Meg and Amy suggestions, and maybe that was like a little earworm for you in terms of coming up with the final name.
Yeah, and I really loved Lexi Martin's values over ego. I hope we bring that forward into our themes as we go along. Really good.
Yeah. Well, I think, we should probably talk about why we're doing this, it wasn't just to have a name and a conversation, although this has been pretty fun.
It's true. And, this is my very first named show. I don't know about you. You've probably done this before, but I was pleased that we landed on something that we could maybe hold for the long haul. No matter where we go with the show, it will always be wherever we are. So I think that's useful, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Meg and Amy has legs, and we did find one other Meg and Amy out there in the media sphere, which we'll bring up in a future episode, not today, because we need to make sure that it's okay. But I think everyone will be pretty excited about our namesakes. All right, so let's talk about why we're actually doing this podcast. What the heck is this thing about, right? So should I go first, or you want to go first?
I think you should go first.
Right.
Yeah.
So, well, of course it was Meg's idea. I mean, it's always Meg's idea. I always say, no matter what, I'm always working for Meg. So whether I'm employed or not, I am working for Meg. So Meg suggested that we do this. And my motivation for doing it goes back to Adam Grant's definition of a sea sponge. So if you've read the book Hidden Potential, he talks about sea sponges and then human sponges. And as soon as I got to this part in the book, I pinged Meg and I said, this is who you are. You're a sponge, which sounds kind of like a diss, but in fact, it's really a good thing. A human sponge is someone who absorbs information, seeks out diverse perspectives, but then they filter what's valuable, they apply it, and they share it. And Meg embodies this so much. And so right now, if you saw like my various text threads, I would have at least 500 messages from Meg a day. and it's really overwhelming. And I wanted to share this with the world. I didn't want it to just be me. So this is an opportunity to sponge with Meg.
Well, that, there's a lot in that, I will say, and it's all true. That I think the subplot is a lot of people think that Meg needs to get a job. She has even more time for reading and absorbing information right now. But I think there's a couple other subplots for me. So number one, I do want a reason to stay in touch and have deep conversations with Amy Wilson on the regular. And so having an excuse for that. I was reflecting, Amy, that it has been, in 2007, we launched a blog together, almost with
also Meg's idea.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Almost the exact same storyline. Meg thinks she should do something, and she wants to be brave to do something she's never done before. And so she drags Amy along because Amy is actually braver than I am and willing to say yes. And as I think about why I blog is a very similar story. I have things to share. I want to distill them for people so that people can understand what I'm trying to say. And I realize that, in today's speed, there's a lot more media coming at people. There's a lot more topics coming through. And so my ability to distill those into blogs and be able to write and make sense of them is just getting it's getting lapped, and I'm struggling. I have this long list of things I want to blog about with no time. I realize that most of my ideas aren't fully formed because we're in a moment where there's more questions than answers. So I really want to have a conversation about these things versus having a complete point of view. And then as I start to listen to podcasts out there, what I find is I'm drawn to podcasts with people that have big ideas. But what I find in these world of podcasts where people that are besties come together and talk about ideas, most of them come with a very skewed way of being overconfident. So it's a confidence forward and assertion forward point of view. And I don't really love that. I really love the lack of confidence. I love the idea of strong opinions weakly held. And I really do think that there's a lot of opportunity for all of us to get this wrong. And so I want to maybe have a slightly different conversation where we have a point of view, but we also leave more space for learning for ourselves and for our audience. And I could think of no one better to do that with than you. So thank you for coming along with me on this journey.
Well, I think it gets back to Lexi's values over ego, right? And that sums it up, Meg.
Hey, this is William Tincup, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about Practitioner Corner podcast. It's a wonderful podcast about the journey, the paths of how practitioners, both HR and TA, kind of go from high school, college, all the way to where they are right now, some of the things that they've learned, how they've been successful, people that thrive around them, etc. It's a fun podcast. You'll love it. You'll learn from it. Subscribe to it. Thanks.
Well, let's sponge then. How about? Shall we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that you hit me up with a couple of things recently that I would describe as AI frameworks. You earmarked these for me, and I think maybe we can talk about this. Does that sound okay?
I think so, yes.
All right. So the first one is an economic value perspective of AI that Aaron Levy from Box wrote in LinkedIn. That was pretty recent. And then the other was one coming in from Microsoft, a work trends report. Do you want to give a high-level summary of these frameworks that just came out?
Yeah, I think because of the source, these might seem very disparate, but I actually believe they're really coming to the same conclusion with very different words and very different frameworks. So if you're not following Aaron on LinkedIn, I strongly recommend it because I think he is modeling some really interesting behaviors of both having a strong point of view, but also adding to his understanding as new information comes forward. And I really like that thinking. But the way he's looking at it is a very entrepreneurial lens. How do we create products and categories that drive value for investors, for customers, and for existing businesses. Like, how are we going to look at leaps in value creation? And so his framework is very much thinking about the move from where AI helps as a partner or a co-pilot, up through how AI helps with autonomous action and driving forward new ways of doing business. And I think underneath his thesis, what is really interesting is the belief that I share that at the end of the day, we're not going to use tools to help us do the work we have today. We're going to actually, where it's going to get interesting is when we use tools to change how we work in ways we can't really completely imagine today. And it's in that space where the big value creation is going to happen.
Right. And so I think a couple of the things that he had said was like the first step is queries, and then you get to tasks, and then workflows, and then fully autonomous, right? And like each step of the way, the more that you have proprietary data, the more you have the ability to directly measure productivity, and the more there's like business context, the more the economic value. So it's not just a clear line of, as you move up that chain of complexity, that it's going to have higher economic value, but layering in those other bits is important as well. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think he's looking at it as a little bit of the Jevons paradox of like, how does the whole problem get bigger? How does the whole market get bigger? How does the addressable opportunities grow in a way that is bigger than each of the lenses? And so his thesis is in a similar way that when cloud businesses came into play, we were originally thinking they would look very similar, but with a different market capture of the enterprise software business. And his argument is that that what we found was entirely new business models came into being as well. And so while there was a disruption to the on-premise markets, every business and every innovation built upon that in a way that captured new economic value. And so it's a very techno-optimist point of view, but it also is driving clarity to where those value creation levers are that I think are really useful as a framework to think about value capture. So I think in the early days of AI, Andrew Ng was talking about like, hey, it's going to be the vertical apps that create new value on top of these foundation models. And I agree with that, but I think Aaron's thesis is a little bit more clear for where the founder energy really needs to be applied and how we need to be thinking about where the growth levers truly are.
Okay, and so then switching gears to the Microsoft report, they had a very similar kind of progression, but took a completely different angle. So what was their angle?
So I would characterize Microsoft's, and again, it's helpful to kind of think about what business they're in to sort of understand where they're coming from. But I see Microsoft as asking the question for themselves of where can they capture more value with the tools and the capabilities that they already have in their portfolio. Again, interesting if you follow Microsoft, but much more interesting if you're thinking about work, because where Microsoft is living, at least in this conversation, is very much tied to, email, calendar, Teams, et cetera. So where they're
personal
participating,
productivity, kind of, right?
Personal productivity, and where they're contributing and having line of sight to how work is happening. So it's the digital side of productivity that they are, they have a unique lens to, and therefore they're thinking about that as value creation and how AI will be added. And so I think this is instructive to where Microsoft is going. It's also instructive to kind of how the digital foundations of work become interesting. And I think that there's more under that than just the Microsoft story.
So they're introducing a new concept of the frontier firm. Is that right?
That's right.
In this paper. And so what is the frontier firm?
So in their mind, and again, this is my reading of it, that the frontier firm is the firm that is moving towards maximizing the use of AI to the productivity of that firm. So it's saying, what can you do with AI today and what will you do with AI in the future? Again, I see it as less about expanding the market and much more about focusing business leaders on productivity improvements within their businesses. So they're saying, hey, to be a very competitive business, frontier firm is a way to think about your future and the path that you take to drive your particular business forward with AI.
So Aaron Levy's is more, maybe for founders and for product development companies to think about how they build AI tools. And then Microsoft's paper is more about for organizations and for leaders to think about adoption of AI. Is that right?
That's exactly right. And I do think that there's going to be a recursion across each of these frameworks over time.
And then, so the Microsoft one, they had three maturity levels, right? So there's the human with assistant, human agent teams, and then human-led agent operated. And so basically the first one is you're getting help to work better. The second one is you as a human, you're able to delegate tasks to an AI. And then the third one is that you become an agent boss and you have like a whole team of AIs, running your business for you. And when I was reading this, it reminded me of this conversation that we had a while back, Meg. I think it was last summer. And you were developing this analogy of self-driving cars to try and think about, to create a framework for people to understand of like where AI is going and how we can think about the longer term. And the first step is, again, what can help you be a better driver. And so there's things like adaptive cruise control and staying in the lane. And, when I get buzzed because I get outside the lane. And then step 2, where you're able to delegate tasks, that's when I have my car change lanes for me. So it does that task for me and I don't have to turn around and try to find my blind spots. And then the third one would be the full self-driving, let it go, the Waymo version. So I think that's a really good way to look at it. And, to realize that we don't have to be at step 3, but it's coming, and to get more comfortable with step 1 for sure, but definitely step 2 in the meantime.
And I would look at, first off, that framework, just to be clear, I stole that. So it came, if any of you guys are watching Nicholas Thompson from The Atlantic, he does Most Interesting Thing in Tech. And when he was at Davos, he mentioned that this was brought forward by Will I Am from the Black Eyed Peas. So just to be clear, I don't want to get in trouble with Will I Am.
Okay, hat tip or hat tips do.
Totally, but
again, it's just another sponge worthiness for Meg here. So,
and we should all celebrate that I actually remembered where I got that, because usually that doesn't happen.
That is true.
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. So that's a big accomplishment. But the way that I think about it is exactly what you described, is imagining and getting yourself mentally prepared for possible futures. But I think there's another layer of this, is that I think we need to also ask ourselves, what are other businesses doing? Because I really do think the ability to compete, not just as a technology provider, but like anybody in business, your ability to compete is going to get a lot more complicated, because the landscape under which your competition is adopting new capabilities and the landscape under which they are optimizing for the future, if you're taking the path based on what you're comfortable with, you might be in trouble, because the market might be expecting a different rate of adoption. And so I think that it's both getting yourself mentally prepared and doing the thought experiments, but it's also getting a little bit more clear that your competition is moving, and oftentimes it's moving at a rate that might not be tied directly to your industry anymore. So we saw something very similar when we were building technology in the early days of mobile, for example, where we would call it the consumerization of IT because we realized that people entering the workforce were expecting tools to look more like consumer apps, and most enterprise software companies were not building to that level of expectation. I think that when things get interesting is when trends start to jump industries, where the expectation in one industry becomes the norm in another. And what I think is happening now with these AI trends is it's happening much more quickly.
What's an example of that?
So I think we're, early on the adoption of co-pilots, et cetera. We saw very quickly when ChatGPT launched is that we had the first wave of skepticism, and is this real and is it at all useful? That cycle was much shorter than it has been in past new innovation eras. And then we moved very quickly to shareholder transcripts, all talking about how AI was going to be used and how AI was going to be leveraged and where you expected to see change to your top line or bottom line based on AI adoption. And then you started hearing of, oh my God, Shopify and Duolingo are saying, hey, we're not hiring anymore, or all of our contractors have to be replaced by AI, et cetera, et cetera. So these sorts of trends you're going to see where you start thinking that your business competition are your natural competitors, and then you start to realize, oh wait, I'm competing with Shopify, because if Shopify is telling its shareholders and its leadership team that AI is the expectation of where work improvement happens, then what happens to my business?
Got it. Okay. Interesting. So the other thing that I thought was really interesting in that article was, or that report, was this concept of like everyone's going to be a manager. Even the kid right out of school who has their first job, they're going to be a manager because they're going to be an agent boss. I thought that was really interesting. And so I guess everyone's a manager of their own time right now. And this just exacerbates that, right? But so people need to buckle up for this new agent boss role that they have.
Yeah, you'll remember, again, as I say, these cycles getting faster, but they're really the same cycles. I think it was like 9 months ago that Lattice announced that, hey, we're going to include in our work model AI workers. And everybody backlashed really, really hard and fast. And now Microsoft is saying, hey, you need to think about AI as workers, right? And I think it was about 3 months ago that Jensen said IT is going to be more HR than HR anymore because IT is going to be managing agents. I really do think there's something here, even though I think all of those of us that have worked in HR have a little bit of an allergy to this. And I think those of us that have recognized that the role of manager is difficult and more complex than what somebody that manages agents might do. I really think that these are all just early indicators that how and what makes up work is really changing out from under us. And I think we all would learn a lesson to be both open-minded and keeping an eye on how these things are changing. Not to just follow blindly what some people are doing or the extremes, but to truly challenge ourselves about what should the norms of work be and how should the norms inform how we create systems and processes around work.
Right. And so certainly those AI workers aren't going to be managed the same as employees, but on the other hand, sort of similar, right? I mean, you want to be able to measure their productivity. You want to make sure that they're being managed. You want to know who is accountable for them, right? So in many ways, there are a lot of similarities there, and so it's important to think about, and who is going to have that governance over those AI workers.
Yeah, I like to joke, like in the early days of social media, there was always these like big oopsies that would happen, and usually they would be blamed on interns, and whether it was truly the fault of interns or not, it was a plausible deniability, accountability moment where you could say, oops, our intern accidentally posted something that was outside of what we authorized in our social media policy, right? And then everybody kind of recovered, and it became less prone to that kind of error. I think where we are with agents, I believe the opportunity for oops, the intern screwed up is just going to be way different, and at a scale I don't think we fully comprehend. So I think there's going to be a lot of learnings and some comic relief in the people getting it wrong. But I encourage us again not to get overconfident in calling these things absurd. Instead, be very curious about how do we want this to work, and how can we make this work in a way that creates the right kind of future versus this dystopian, like everybody is just managing a bunch of robots and living this like miserable reality, right? Or sitting back and losing purpose and meaning and hard elements of work, because I do think it's in the hard parts that we grow, and that we feel proud of what we've done, and that we feel that we've accomplished something. And I just don't want to see that go away.
All right, Meg, switching gears, we have promised various folks that we will be dishing out some advice on this show as well. So we're going to move over to Leadership Corner.
Woohoo!
Leveraging our decades of experience as executives and people that care about people. So for today's Leadership Corner question, here we go. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Oh, and I do want to make sure that everyone sends in questions. We would love to get your questions and bring them forward on the show. We'll put up an email for you to use maybe later in the show. Here we go. I am a new executive at a big company. I have never worked at a big company before. I've always run my own companies. What do I need to know or do in order to succeed?
You want me to go first?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's a couple big things that are unique in large companies versus small companies. But information capture and sharing, as well as stakeholder management, is just an entirely different set of skills in a small company versus a large company. In a large company, there are formal and informal types of information flows. And in order to really get stuff done in a big company, you have to be part of both. And not just as a receiver, but also as a participant and a value creator in that. So what I advise people when they go to a big company is to first have a large dose of humility and be truly interested in all of the people there, not just the people that are going to work for you or that care about you getting your work done. Spend more time getting to know people who are not affiliated with your work and understand what they're doing, understand what they care about, and understand where they get their information to do good work. This will give you a lot of clues into the unwritten power structures. It will give you a lot of clues into how information flows, and it will hopefully set you up for building the kind of foundational relationships you need to be able to get stuff done in a big company, which does often require more influence skills versus just your own capabilities.
Always brilliant. So what I would say is that, if you're running your own company or you're, part of a small company, obviously relationships are super important, but they're all kind of external, right? Your customers, your clients, your stakeholders, board members. So relationships are really important when you are part of a small company. But they're also really important as a big company. It's just that more of those relationships are inside the company than outside the company, right? So of course, customers matter a ton, your stakeholders, your influencers, etc. But building those internal relationships and making sure that they're well balanced, that you're bringing badassery, but you're also bringing likability all at the same time is really important.
Hey, what is your tip for likability, Amy? Because there was an interesting thread on, hey, it's better to be value-oriented than likable. Our good friend Adam Grant put that. And I had a bit of a reaction to that, knowing that there's a gendered element to the likability. So what does it mean to you when you recommend to people to be likable?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Meg. I think caring about what other people think and what other people are doing and what they're about is what makes someone likable, right? And so kind of back to what you were saying, if you just isolate yourself into your small team, your small org, just the people who work for you and maybe your peers and that sort of thing, you can get by for a little while. But if you're not out there interested and caring about, the broader landscape of the company, your executive peers way over here and their subordinates and counterparts and so on, then you are going to be seen as you're really only in it for yourself. And that starts to leak over into values, right? So you can project through likability, through caring about others, through caring about what people do, you can project your values of, I'm actually about the overall business and not just about myself.
So I think the broader story in a big company is that you need to play a longer game in your own definition of success, and it will take more at the beginning, but then it will yield more over time because you have the opportunity to impact in a way in a large company that you don't in a small company. You end up in rooms and with opportunities that you wouldn't have in a small company. So you need to value the fact that the way you spend your time would be different.
Well, thank you for that, Meg. So let's go ahead and wrap up.
So I think we need to tell the audience about your hand, Amy. I see some tape on your fingers, which is actually progress.
Yeah. I had this on, but I've mostly not been wearing it. It's a removable splint. I broke my hand 6 weeks ago, and just now getting it back.
Have you worked on your story so it sounds less pathetic, or how did you hurt your hand, Amy?
It was a boxing match.
There you go. Well done.
You should see the other guy. Actually, don't, because he's in bad shape.
Well done.
All right. So any quick takeaways from this episode?
Yeah, I guess the takeaways are a couple fold. Number one, getting our legs under us in a podcast is going to be fun and challenging for you and I. I think talking about some of these bigger trends will be a recurring theme. And I think that there's a lot for all of us to learn. So I'm really eager to see how people respond and then also advise us differently. And I think that at the end of the day, what we want from this podcast is to remind our broader community that we can all learn so much from each other. And let's make sure that we keep doing that.
That's awesome. All right. So a couple things. One is that we do want submissions for Leadership Corner. So send those our way. And then please do subscribe and spread the word about our podcast. Next week, we will be hosting a guest. So our very first guest will be Jill Popelka, who's the CEO of cybersecurity company Darktrace and our good friend and former colleague. So really excited to host Jill next time.
I'm excited for everybody to hear all the great things that she's been doing too. This is Amy and I got to spend some time with Jill last week and had the best time and learned a lot. So I'm eager for everyone to get that opportunity.
Yeah, Meg and Amy took London
and Paris.
And
Don't forget Paris. We'll always have Paris, Amy.
All right, everyone, we're signing off. Make every day count.
Let's invent the future together. I believe in us.